Shalom, Mishpacha. This is your brother DivineProspect of Kingdom Harmony Ministries right here in Hebrew Congregation of Atlanta, where the overseer is Minister Moray Milton Carnes. And we're going to give you guys some great insight on how you can merge and aggregate history, archaeology, and the scriptures to understand the ethnogenesis and anthropology behind the Hebrew Israelite peoples, cultures, and customs. All right, so we're going to go into something that's very interesting and haven't seen a lot of people within our community actually do this. But once you guys see how you can triangulate data and put it together to get a more overall view or vantage point and what was going on back in time in history, this is one of the great tools that you can utilize to really much put yourself in the shoes of our ancient forefathers who were actually in this time period and see exactly what they experienced. So first and foremost, we're going to start off with a couple of scriptures. I'm going to do some scriptures, I'm going to go over a little bit of language, some geography, and some archaeology, because all of this will come full circle by the time we're at the end of this brief, short, little lecture that we're going to do here. So the topic that I'm speaking on now is the Philistines. Who are the Philistines, and what role did they play in causing Israel to emerge as a nation state, all right? So when we first go to Genesis chapter 10, verse 14, it gives us the history of who the Philistines came from. So I'm going to go ahead and get that scripture for y'all real quick, and we're going to go ahead and dive into that. It says, Pathrusim and Casluhim, from which came the Philistines and Caphtorim. Philistines and Caphtorim. We're going to see exactly why that's important. When you go into any one of your lexicons and you look up the word for Philistine, you get the word Peleset, right? Or Peleshutet, depending upon how you want to pronounce it. That's going to be your Pe, your Lamed, your Shin, and your Tav, okay? And the reason why this is important is because the actual word Palestine derives from Peleset. And this was the way that the Greeks named the land or the area we know today as Israel or Palestine. They named that area that specifically to piss off the Israelites, because the Israelites had always had the arch enemy of the Philistines, right? That's very important. But when we see this, we see that the Philistines came from who? Ham. They came from out of the lineage of Ham. But we have to first identify what Caphthor is, and once we understand where that place is at, we understand the origin of the Philistines, all right? So, interesting thing, we're going to look at a few things to understand. If you look here on this chart that we have up here, you see where I have Genesis 10:14. Deuteronomy 2:23 also goes in to connect the Caphthor as well as the Philistines. And I have the spelling here as well as Peleset, all right? There was a situation in the first Iron Age period. The Bronze Age period ended at about 1200 BCE, and the Iron Age period began at about 1200 BCE. They had a situation of a people from the Aegean Sea civilization called the Sea Peoples. And these Sea Peoples had made their way from the Aegean Sea region onto the land of Palestine or the Levantine region. And in doing so, they cut off trade routes, they upset whole societies, and at that time, bronze was made out of tin and copper. So a lot of the trade routes between Egypt and Mesopotamia was cut off by these Sea Peoples, and they uprooted and obliterated several societies, one being Ugarit, right, or Ras Shamra, which we would call today, where that mound is at, right? So why is this important? It's because when the Israelites migrated from out of Mizraim and settled into the land of what we call Israel or the Levantine region, they stayed there for a couple of hundred years. And in development for a couple hundred years, they started to integrate and aggregate things that they learned from the other cultures that was there in that land that the Most High kept telling the Israelites not to do. During this period of time, you had several judges that rose up, and they would deliver the Israelites from out of the hands of the various enemies that the Most High would use to oppress them. Why is this important? Because during this period of time, it was hard to distinguish outside cultures, to distinguish and make Israel distinct as a nation. They were only a people amongst other people, hence why they were also considered to be Canaanites. This is very important. But when the Sea Peoples migrated and they landed in the region of Israel, Palestine today, on the coastal plain area, which you can see I have a small map here of that, they started to set up shop there, and they took a lot of their culture from the Aegean Sea with them there in the area of Palestine, what we call the coastal plain lines. The coastal plains is where you have most of the fertile land that was there. So that also, part of geography, was very important for the people at that time, especially if you have flocks that you want to graze as well. The Israelites were confined mostly in what's called the Central Hill countryside, and then later on, as the Sea Peoples came and weakened the Canaanites that was in that region, and the Philistines as a people set up shop as a nation, that started to threaten the existence of the Israelites. And we'll see this is what caused the Israelites to become a nation state. Now, we have two things in regards to history and archaeology that helps us to identify who these people are. If you go into the mortuary temple of Ramses III at Medinet Habu, you'll see that he has an elaborate story on him defeating the sea peoples. And one of the sea peoples in which he had identified was Pereset. In the Medunetia, or what we call the hieroglyphics, the R and the L is interchangeable. But if you look for the cognate in Hebrew, you get Peleset. So we'll be able to identify, hey, well, the Egyptians and the Israelites are both making reference to the same people. This is very important because if you don't know how to identify things within the Israelite culture and outside of the culture, you won't be able to get the rest of the history behind what is going on in that region. Now, when you go ahead and you look at that, you'll see that Pereset was one of those sea peoples that settled in that region of the coastal plains that the Egyptians had fought, and the Egyptians had kind of much kept at bay. But you'll see that they actually damaged all of the Canaanites that was in that region, and the sea peoples laid waste to the point where after cutting off the trade routes, they had to find another way of metallurgy to create metals that they can use for war, chariots, etc. And this is where iron came and took effect. 1200 BCE to about 1166 BCE. During this period of time, once that area was weakened, the Israelites as a people started to flourish and started to expand. This is where we see a lot of Israelite culture, pottery. We see a lot of the burials. We see a lot of their diet. We see a lot of animals there that we would find in the Leviticus chapter 10 or Vayikra chapter 11, of the actual dietary law. And what we'll see is that when these Philistines or these sea peoples came and settled on the coastal plains, guess what we see there? We see bones of dogs, bones of swine, bones of every unclean animal. It is proposed that the Philistines in that region during that time had some of the worst diet because they ate almost anything that they can get their hands on, right? And you can see why David will call Goliath an uncircumcised heathen or Gentile or Goyi, right? Somebody from one of those nations, because they looked down upon these people because they looked at them as savages, okay? Also, when we study the pottery of the Philistine people that started to develop in that area at that time, it started off with what's called the Mycenean ware 3C. Mycenean ware 3C, you can go back and see that that originates in the Aegean Sea, and it also influenced what we call Cypriot-Minoan pottery. Go back and look at pottery. The Philistines, after settling there, had some of the residue of the Aegean Sea civilization, but they started to create what's called the Philistine Bichrome ware. Philistine Bichrome ware, if you look at it, it's a pottery or pottery vessel that has two colors on it. A lot of times it would be a gray, or sometimes a white, and have a black banding around it, okay? This was also distinct from Israelite pottery, and you see in Judean sites, which would be more of like a kind of like a burgundy color with a collar lid and a black band around it. So we can start to see two different cultures emerging out of the region of Palestine at this time. Now, this is important because we start to see 5 major cities. It's called the Pentapolis. Penta in Greek means 5, and polis means city. 5-point cities that they actually established in that region, the coastal plains, and those 5 being Gaza, which we know today as the Gaza Strip, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Ekron, and Gath. Ekron and Gath, as you can see here on this map, were the cities that, when the Philistines were expanding, started to encroach upon Judah. And they established Gath and they established Ekron. When the Israelites started to see these people started to make their way towards where they was at, it started to become a problem for the people because they was not as organized as these people from the Aegean Sea. The Aegean Sea peoples were in that region for hundreds and hundreds of years. And remember, the Israelites had just migrated into this region, and they also had issues and disputes amongst themselves. So look how important this is. When we go look at Medinet Habu, that site that I told you where the Ramses III mortuary temple is at, they actually found an Israelite house. One identifying marker of Israelite culture during the Iron Age 1 and Iron Age 2 period is a 4-room mud brick house. And it's structured in a particular way where you'll see the center house in the middle and then offshoots to 3 other houses. We actually found a house just like that in the region of Medinet Habu, which is in Mizraim or Egypt, which means that that's a fingerprint that an Israelite lived there in that region, which is very interesting. Go back and research that. I bring it up to say, when we start to see in this region what we call Judah, we start to see these 4-bedroom mud brick houses start to appear there, which is an ethnic marker to identify these people who started to arise calling the Judeans or Israelites. So when we go into the scriptures in 1 Samuel chapter 7, we see something very, very interesting. Let me go ahead and grab that for you. 1 Samuel chapter 7. I'm going to get that. All right. 1 Samuel chapter 7, verse 1. I'm going to read this for you guys, okay? It says, Then the men of Jearim, came and took the ark of the Most High and brought it into the house of Abinadab on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to keep the ark of the Most High. So it was that the ark remained in Kirjath Jearim a long time. It was there 20 years, and all the house of Israel lamented after the Most High. Then Samuel spoke to all the house of Israel, saying, If you return to the Most High with all your hearts, then put away the foreign gods and the Ashtaroths from among you, and prepare your hearts for the Most High, and serve him only. He will deliver you from the hand of the Philistines. So the children of Israel put away the Baals and the Ashtoreths and served the Most High only. And Samuel said, Gather all Israel to Mizpah, and I will pray to the Most High for you. So they gathered together at Mizpah, drew water, poured it out before the Most High, and they fasted day. And there they said, We have sinned against the Most High. And Samuel judged the children of Israel at Mizpah. Now the Philistines heard that the children of Israel had gathered together at Mizpah. The lords of the Philistines went up against Israel, and the children of Israel heard of it. They were afraid of the Philistines. So the children of Israel said to Samuel, Do not cease to cry out to the Most High, our Elohim, for us, that he may save us from the hand of the Philistines. And Samuel took a suckling lamb and offered as a whole burnt offering to the Most High. Then Samuel cried out to the Most High for Israel, and the Most High heard them. Now Samuel was offering up the burnt offering. The Philistines drew near to battle against Israel. But the Most High thundered with a loud thunder upon the Philistines that day, and so confused them that they were overcome before Israel. And the men of Israel went out to Mizpah and pursued the Philistines and drove them back as far as Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone, set it up between Mizpah and Shen, and called it today Ebenezer, saying, Thus far the Most High has helped us. That's 1 Samuel chapter 7. Now we start to get some insight to see how these Philistines who were there on the scene were antagonizing the Israelites to the point where the Israelites were afraid because they were not as organized for battle like the Philistines were. How interesting is this is that every time they had an issue, the Most High would do divine intervention, prevent the Philistines from overtaking the Israelites. But now, instead of them depending upon the Most High, they wanted to depend on themselves. So we're going to go to 1 Samuel chapter 8, and we're going to see how this thing plays out. 1 Samuel chapter 8. All right. I'm going to jump to verse 6, all right? 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 6 says, But the thing that displeased Samuel when they said, the children of Israel, Give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to the Most High. Now, as he was praying to the Most High, he said to the Most High, Listen, this is what the children of Israel want. The Most High says, Well, I've been their king all this time, but if that is what they want, warn them that if they take a king, this is what they're going to have to expect. After Samuel tells the people what to expect, when we go to verse 20, we see exactly how they respond. Verse 20 says, That we may also be like all the nations, the Goyim, and that our Melech, our king, Malach, will judge us and go out before us and fight our battle. So we just saw in the previous chapter that the Most High fought the battles for the Israelites, but now they wanted to be like the other nations. Remember, the nation that they had came up against was the Philistines, and the Philistines had their own tribes amongst their ethnic group as well, who stationed those 5 cities that I mentioned to you. So now we see the Israelites are leaving the supernatural realm of divine intervention that was helping them fight against their enemies, and now they wanted to be like the other nations. So when we go into history, into archaeology, we see the anthropology or the emergence of what was going on with the peoples at that time. And as the Philistines came onto the land of the coastal plains and started to expand, they became a threat to the Judean and the Israelite sites that was there at that time. Hence, when the Israelites started to cry out for a king, and now a political regime was established to be the nation state, which started with Saul, went to David, who also fought against the Philistines. We had peace during the time of Solomon, but then after Solomon and the kingdom split, we started to see the Philistines become more of an antagonist once again. So this is interesting because without additional information, sometimes it's very difficult for us to ascertain historically what our forefathers endured, encountered when they were living in the land. But with this information, you can go back with these resources that you see here and do your research, and you will discover a much broader view and vantage point of how our forefathers lived. With that, family, I thank you for watching. I want to say peace, shalom, and black power, and tune in again for our next episode so you can see how history, archaeology, and the scriptures all speak to one another and give us more insight on our culture. Shalom.